I'm really excited to talk about the record. It's so good. I know that you finished recording it just as the pandemic hit. You had been in Wales.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could tell us about the time you spent in Wales and then presumably the scramble to get back to Paris.
Yeah, a bit of a scramble. It was actually, I feel like maybe on the stuff that's been written about it isn't totally clear. There was like a week in Wales that was in a cottage in the middle of nowhere, and then separately there was a week in the studio in Box in Wiltshire. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there was rehearsing in Wales, and then there was recording in Box at Real World Studios. And yeah, so we were kind of in this, in studio mode, just sort of immersed in what we were doing. Every day there was a bit more in the news about what was happening in the world, and people were sort of varying degrees of nervous. I was just completely behind. I mean, I just thought, oh, there's a new type of flu. It'll be all right. I had no idea. I've really, eating my hat about that now. And then we all went home, and then bam, the sort of garage door slammed shut, and it was just in the nick of time. And it was funny because you're in such a bubble when you're recording in a studio anyway. It was a real extreme bubble factor, and all of a sudden the world had completely changed from 1 week to the next, which was the case for everyone. Everyone had that experience, really, I guess.
How has the pandemic been in Paris? Have you been able to get back to the UK since to see your family?
No, not being able to get back. I mean, I guess I could have done if I'd made the effort, and if I had a place to quarantine, I could do it. Mm-hmm. There's always a way of making it happen, I guess, but it doesn't seem worth it because I don't have enough time to quarantine, and still, it's not going to happen. So It's a bit, but then there are people in trickier situations than me, so I'll see them one day soon, hopefully.
And it's been quite an eventful path to this new record, because I know you were ready to start one and then you got invited out on tour with the National for their last record. I wondered how that process, how that experience with them maybe changed how you see yourself as like a band leader or a songwriter, and if maybe there are decisions you made with the new record that you think came about because you had been in that situation.
I wonder. Definitely, I really remember, definitely just being in someone else's band and not being in charge of everyone was brilliant. It just did me so much good to be playing music every night with people I really loved, but to not be in charge of them and responsible for them. That was a nice sort of holiday side to it. But equally, it was nice to watch how people go about their touring and how things get done, and how everyone looks after each other and stuff. So that, I think, was it's always good to see how other people do their work, basically. So that was interesting. Also, I don't know how much of it is transferable to what I do, because it's such a different level of production and organization. With This Is the Kit, we're all in a van and just doing everything ourselves. But with, obviously, on that scale, there's so many people involved, and it's really a finely tuned machine of efficiency. So that, I guess, I hope that has sort of sunk in a little bit. The finely tuned machine of efficiency, I hope that comes out in the next touring I do. But yeah, I don't know how it's, I mean, I haven't done any This Is the Kit stuff, like touring or playing.
I meant more songwriting,
songwriting, yeah. Sorry.
Whether your role on stage, I don't know, had made you hear your voice differently, or introduce different ideas about song structure or anything like that. Maybe not.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it probably has. I remember being on stage and every night singing the same songs, but sometimes different songs, and just thinking, wow, I'm actually studying these songs. The fact that I'm reading the lyrics every day and singing them and watching them be performed, it was actually I felt like I could sort of, do my PhD on national songs, or so, not PhD, but A level of national songs. And I do wonder how much of Matt's writing has sort of soaked in a little bit to my subconscious, and just I think it might have given me a bit more confidence about certain things, I hope, just because I think seeing people do stuff usually does give you, it gives you ideas and reminds you that, people can do this.
Mm-hmm. I know that you met Josh Kaufman at one of the People events that they did in Berlin. What made him the right collaborator for this record?
He, I just love being in his company. I actually, we sort of worked together at a couple of the People things, but we first met when we were working on a song with Aeneas Mitchell together. Mm-hmm. And it was just immediate fun. and I could tell all of the choices he was making were all things that I like. You know, when someone's saying stuff and suggesting things, you're like, wow, that's what I was thinking. I was going to say that. And it just felt like a really good chemistry. He's just so nice to hang out with, and just has a great communication, and is really good at finding ideas. He plays beautifully every instrument he picks up. And so, yeah, I was really keen for him to do this one. And it was cool that he was up for it.
When you were writing the songs for this record, was there a particular track that kind of felt like a lodestone that pulled the others into focus?
I don't think so, but it might happen yet, because for me, it takes a while before I get enough, like, because you're in the songs writing them, then you're in the songs recording them, and that's like a little bit more perspective because you've got the rest of the band playing, and so you hear it and see it all differently. And then a next level of stepping back is like the mixing process, and then I think as time goes on and as I play them live, I'll get more perspective. And well, that's what's happened with the other albums anyway. It's like only after a few months of it being out or on tour or whatever, I'm like, oh, this is the linchpin that like holds it all together, whatever. But I think I haven't found the lodestone yet.
I got sent some notes that you'd written about the record, and in those you said you don't like the idea that art has to come out of negative experiences, that you want to make good stuff out of joy, but you said, I feel like for whatever reason this is the writing that came out. And listening to the lyrics, I felt like, you know, it describes quite what seemed to be quite a profound period of change, like the title track being about a friend who passed away. I felt like there was a lot of emotional kind of frustration on there, and you sort of asking questions about who you are and who you want to be. I mean, did it feel like you went through a big period of change yourself?
I think so, yeah. I think it was a bit of a transformation time. It was at the end of a lot of touring, like years of not really stopping, and so that kind of had a kind of chemical effect on things. And then also touring with the National, obviously that is more touring, but it's a different type of touring, so that changed also like what I was thinking, and just this kind of headspace I was able to access is different when your kind of daily rhythms change. And I think it was just, I think in our lives we just have times of bigger more intense change than others sometimes, and I feel like quite often that comes with like, yeah, you know, falling down some stairs or cracking a rib or whatever. I think people, like, physical stuff brings us forward emotionally and psychologically. You can't force it, obviously. It's not a good idea to go and sort of break your ankle just so that you can get past an emotional block or whatever, but I feel like the two are really linked. I feel like you notice it in children, with their sort of development, they'll sort of learn new stuff after having chicken pox or whatever, and I feel like that doesn't actually ever stop. It's still happening as adults. We get ill and then we're a bit different afterwards. We sort of shed skin or something.
Yeah, you cracked a rib and you had bronchitis, is that right?
Yeah, it was a really stupid run of events. Fell down some stupidly slippery stairs, cracked a rib. Just as it got bare, got really bad bronchitis, and then in coughing, cracked another rib. It was a hilarious comedy sequence of events. Well, looking back, it's comedy. At the time, it was horrible.
I mean, what was different for you on the other side of that?
I think just, I don't know, I just felt different. I mean, I feel different now to how I did before lockdown and everything. Like, I feel like these things were just different all the time. I hope that I'm a little bit, again, it's hard to know because it's not totally directly related to having a cracked rib, but I feel like I'm a bit braver and less timid now. I'd be interested to quiz one of those doctors who like says, oh, you've got a sore nose, that means you're having trouble letting go of, I don't know, your childhood or something. I'd like to like quiz someone about what different ailments mean in terms of emotional well-being, but yeah, until then I'll just have to guess and just feel it out.
Are there songs on the record where you feel like you hear that kind of new boldness, like things you've done that you've done on this that you wouldn't have done in the past?
Probably. I think I don't know, I'm not bold enough yet to say where I'm bold, if sort of I mean, it feels too much like blowing my own trumpet or something, but I feel like there are places where I've been more open to other people's suggestions than in the past. Like, there's a lot more sort of keyboardy, synthy stuff on this album, and effects, and on the voice as well, which normally is like a big red no for me. I'm just
You're
like,
very
no,
anti
don't put any. I mean, I'm not anti it in principle, but I think you use it when it's useful. And this album, I've seen ways in which it can be useful. But normally my relationship with reverb is I'm a female at a gig and the sound engineer just thinks, oh, I'll make your voice sound nice, love. And they'll just like whack on loads of reverb. And I just think, no, turn it off.
You said that there are parts of the record that feel prophetic to you now in terms of like the pandemic and everything we've all been living through for the past 6 months or longer. What are the resonances in it that really kind of gave you those chills?
I feel like, yeah, writing just does that. It just accidentally resonates with the future once the future finally gets around to arriving. I think with this album, I was a bit worried that people would hear me talking about hospitals and dying and coughing and breathing and not being able to get outside and needing to get outside. Like this whole list of stuff that just seems a bit too linked to what's been going on these past few months, but weren't written about that at all because they were written before that existed. So that feels a bit weird. But I guess it's just a reminder that writing does that, whether it's songs or like poetry or prose or whatever. It's just when you use words, funny things happen.
But yeah, this is maybe a bit too existential for this conversation, but I feel like so much criticism I've read this year has people saying it's so resonant now, it's sort of like eerily prophetic. Do you think there's any particular reason that it happens? Is it sort of like that, the same thing with like a horoscope where you can read it and be like, this really resonates with do we read what we want into things? Or do you think that artists do have any sort of foresight or knowledge?
I don't think it's necessarily artists or foresight or knowledge. I just think human beings get lucky sometimes with what they're talking about and what language they use or what symbols they use. And I definitely think that we interpret stuff. Like, obviously, when I started mixing the album, it was during the lockdown, and so I was listening to everything through the ears of that situation. So you kind of project your situation onto what you're processing. And I think that's always the case, whether it's like, tarot reading or astrology or whatever. But I don't feel like that's a reason to disregard tarot reading and stuff. I feel like that it's really important tools of self-reflection and of like awareness of coincidence and the universe. I think those are nice things to spot and to enjoy. And I don't feel like, I'm up for what anyone wants to believe. I think is a good thing to believe in if it helps.
And I guess that I am not creative myself, but I hear artists say that a lot, that you just have to remain very open to things, open to that kind of possibility and not get jaded.
Yeah, I think so. You just gotta, just as humans in general, you just gotta be open to stuff that comes, and then you gotta let it go and move on or whatever, and not be too freaked out by things. Yeah,
You obviously you stopped touring for a little while, but then the pandemic meant that there was absolutely no touring whatsoever. How have you coped with the sort of enforced stillness?
Well, I think it's funny because it's happened at a time when I didn't have very much touring booked in anyway, but there was still like summer festivals and bits and bobs. So adding up all the sort of lockdown time and then this time is the longest amount of my adult life when I haven't been on tour, and it's really interesting because I'm living in a flat with like my partner and our daughter, and we've never spent this much time together. Well, since she was 6 anyway. Before that we toured together and that was fine, but now we're all in the same space for months and months, and it's quite interesting. It's probably a good thing because we're learning new stuff about living with each other. But normally, like, one of us is away, then the other one comes back. Oh my god, it's normally constantly shifting.
Has it been like a fruitful creative time or difficult to get stuff done?
When it was like in the like heart of it all, and it was pretty weird and difficult to get things done for me. Like, the streets were like deserted. No one was allowed outside. It was a bit weird to be productive. But since then, I feel like there's been little bursts of productivity. It's hard to know whether it's because of it. It's definitely because I'm not on tour, but I don't know what else it's because of. But yeah, it's just because I'm here, kind of with gaps, with little air pockets of time. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do that now. But yeah.
One of the other ways that I thought that the new album seemed really resonant is when you released Moonshine Freeze, you said that you'd been thinking a lot about honesty and truth. And certainly over the last 3 years, they have become complicated concepts, especially in sort of political discourse and even how people relate to each other. I wondered if that had been on your mind when you were writing these songs.
Yes. I mean, not so much the concept of truth, but definitely how people are dealing with each other and dealing with world politics. Well, politics on all scales, whether it's just like who's in your local greengrocers, or whether it's who's running your country or who's running someone else's country. There's a lot of stuff that people are having to deal with now. I think we get really funnel fed a lot of manipulated information, which makes it really hard to navigate your way through it all and to know what you think and how to act. And I think that is a lot of what was on my mind when I was writing this album. I think that it has a big effect on you when your country, or even someone else's country, is being run by a really bad person. It just it can only have a negative effect on like everyone's health.
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone that thinks they're a bad person, if you're someone that thinks they're great, then you're probably totally on top form. But the rest of us are just like sort of like panicking and like not, the fact that certain countries don't have health care for everyone is just, for me, that's like a sort of crime against humanity. That's not okay. So yeah, there's that sort of anxiety is in the album as well, definitely.
In terms of how to act, I love that lyric in Carry Us Please, one of the songs you played. You won't make this change by slagging things off. Go get some ideas now. What else have you got? Was there a specific incident that made you write that line?
Not an incident, just the general pattern at the moment. It seems to just be on social media and to bitch at each other and to be negative and unhelpful and mean and violent as well. There's so much violence on Twitter and on like, platforms like that. And I just think that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the person being nasty and being violent and aggressive towards people. It's just poison. Mm-hmm. And so why does that happen? Why do people do that? Why are they drawn to this horrible, nasty, like religion almost? And so yeah, I think we should get off that and start living in the real world a little bit and helping each other out.
I just read a review of a new book which was critical about social media. It was a very good review where the guy said, like, people like to blame Mark Zuckerberg and Silicon Valley and whoever for creating technologies that just prey on our kind of dopamine weakness. But he was like, that's one explanation, but really what if the explanation is that we are just deeply drawn to that kind of self-destruction and horrible impulse?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I think both things are true. And I also think we're drawn to positive stuff and healthy stuff. But at the same time, yeah, humans are always going to get drawn to the darkness, I think, and we have to make a conscious effort to help each other out of that darkness because it's really poisonous.
I read an interview a few years ago where you said that you were quite keen to get more involved with local politics, and I realised it must be really hard as a touring musician, but I wondered if that had happened in your life.
Well, sort of, funnily enough, like, yeah, it's hard to choose which local to choose as well, because soon I won't be allowed to vote in the UK anymore because I've been here for 15 years.
Oh wow.
But since 15 years I've been voting in the UK, obviously, and like really invested in the politics over there. But because I live here, I think it's also really important that I get involved in stuff that's happening actually in my neighbourhood and with my local community. But at the same time, it's hard, like you say, when you're on tour. But last year when I was on tour with the National, I managed to squeeze in a day of canvassing when we played in Brighton. I was kind of checking online to see where we were going and where it sort of lined up, and there was like a canvassing day happening in Brighton the day that the National played there, and I was like, okay, great, I'll see you later, guys. I'm just gonna go. I'll be back in a few hours. And so that felt really good. But it also is a bit sad because you're talking to these people who don't trust anyone. Mm-hmm. And are just worried about themselves, and it's really hard. It's hard to know how to help people out of this me, I mindset, because you don't know what their situation is. Obviously, whatever reason, they're worried about themselves and their own house and their own money and their own taxes. but it would be cool if people started thinking about people that are harder off than them. Jessie, could you plug in the computer battery? It looks like it isn't plugged in. Sorry about that small commercial break.
We were talking about our, a potential like attraction to the darkness. In the notes that you sent me, you wrote something I thought was really striking, which was that good will come back, but we need to be ready for it to come back and sort of prepared to welcome it. Do you think there's a chance that we could miss it? I don't know, what sort of mindset is that? I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, I think we just work in cycles. So like we'll go through a horrible time, and also I say we. It depends on which country, where they are in their own history, where they are in their own story, which other countries they're in sort of conflict or communication with. Like it's a complicated dance, I think. But I do think at the moment it feels like we're in quite a deep, dark place globally. There's a lot of fear and capitalism and selfish mentality. But I think we will get out again, because this has happened before, and then afterwards there was better times. So I think we do just need to keep our eyes peeled. We'll also be the change, because if we are the change that we want to see, then we'll be ready when it starts like taking effect. I hope.
As well as those historical patterns of coming out of it, what else makes you keeps you optimistic? If you are optimistic, maybe that's
Yeah, I think I am optimistic. I wonder if it's because to be anything else would just mean jumping off a cliff. I don't know. Is that just what humans do? Humans are just optimistic because that's part of their survival mechanism. I think, well, every day you see people being brilliant and helping each other and living together and getting on and creating amazing stuff together. So I think that gives me hope. And if we can just remember that that's happening and just not just be reading all the bad news all the time, if we can sort of remember that there are communities that are getting built in places where there used to be really violent conflicts, stuff, there is positive change, but we need to make it happen. We need to be more proactive about it, I think.
Was Magician, one of the songs you played, felt like a sort of celebration of those kind of individuals as well? Who did you have in mind when you were writing it?
Well, a few different, let me see, I've got the lyrics here, because I feel like every line has a few different things that I think of when I'm singing it. I feel like in the last verse, I often think of, well, two things. Partly an Ursula Le Guin interview I heard once, where someone was asking her about what to do about the state of the world. And she said, well, I've done my time. I'm in my 80s now. That's for the next generations to be doing. I've done what I can, and I'm an old lady, and these kids have got to sort their shit out. And so that, I think about that in the last verse, and I also think of, well, I guess mainly people like Greta Thunberg, who like this amazing, young, powerful, inspiring sort of person who's created a really positive movement and has given a lot of hope to a lot of people. And so yeah, this sort of comparison of ages and of lives that have been lived, and the way in which people go about trying to make positive change depending on when they lived and how they lived and stuff, things like that.
This is what you did, which one of the other songs that you played, I've heard you saying that it can be about sort of like a paranoid negative voice that's sort of always nagging at you inside, but I also felt like maybe there's a positive side to it as well. This is, through the filter of 2020, where it feels a little bit like an ultimatum about how did you actually behave this year? What's your balance sheet going to be at the end of it? Like, you're going to reap what you sow. Do you think there's an element of that in it as well?
Yeah, definitely, because you can't correct your repetitive negative behavior without observing it and actively doing so. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to be a bit awake to what you do and the ways in which it's not great in order to mend that, and then do better next time, and then even better the next time. And it's a filtration process, I think, working on ourselves.
And often as well, it's something that seems insurmountable, but you realise that it's just really little kind of like notches of the dial in a different direction to actually make quite a dramatic change.
Yeah, exactly. It's just incremental and slow. And often I think we don't even see the change that's happening. It's just after looking back, with a bit of perspective, you're like, oh, I see the path.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, that was everything that I was going to ask you. Thank you so much for sharing those songs with us. It was really beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for doing this, Laura. I really appreciate it. It's nice to chat to you.